Circles. She's spinning me around in circles again. Oh, that skinny blonde girl. Something about the ages. I failed college algebra again. That skinny blonde girl. And the circles and the ages and the ages. Beautiful.
It's an honor for me to introduce President Eyring.
Today is all right for tonight. Riding in a Corvette and feeling all right. Today is all right for tonight. Today is all right for tonight. Riding in a Corvette and feeling all right. All right for tonight.
which is pretty neat. They also have vanishing point, which is like my favorite thing. About programming, but I know a little bit, so maybe I could do something about it.
if you're in a movie, you're just suddenly like, well, I don't want there to be any sound. It better be for a really good reason. You know what I'm saying? Because sound is like a really, really good tool to have to be able to use. Like, if you're going to have that be a thing, yeah, like, again, like, if you're suddenly gonna turn off the sound making because there's such a big impact, or because, like, you're getting ready for some kind of impact, don't just have there be no sound because you messed up, or because you're like, well, sound is cheating. Like, no, that's part of the medium. Or, like, not showing anything moving in movies. That would be Do I not turn this black? Okay, lightness, okay. Tool options. I still don't have that set up, so I probably should, Another thing that I've kind of wanted to experiment with is, a lot of times in Japanese comics, the tail of the bubble is really minimal, like that. And they seem to get it across who's talking, like, they have a decent, I think with most Japanese comics, it's still pretty obvious who's talking. There's some, okay, and I'm gonna sound, I don't know, if you're not used to me, I'm gonna sound confusing, because, I don't know, I am a weeb, probably, but I don't really think, like, Japanese comics are doing things that American comics aren't doing, because they're clearly successful. Like, they're doing something that American comics are not doing. And I think if we take a chance to, like, learn from each other, or, well, mostly American comics learn from Japanese comics. Like, whatever. All our comics are super old, they're good. Or they're comic strips. Comic books, I feel like, especially over here, like, they don't really have the same kind of expertise put into them. There's, like, a lot of things that just sort of have gotten spread around as, like, commonly accepted knowledge in comic books of, like, what's okay and what's not in terms of, like, how you tell the story, but I feel like a lot of that knowledge is, though widely accepted, completely incorrect and erroneous. So, like, I don't know, like, how do you tell what size to make your panels? Some people say, oh, make them big if it's an establishing shot, or like, oh, make them big if you want the reader to, like, take longer reading them. But none of those things make any sense. Instead, you should make a panel bigger if it's more important. Like, whether it's a big emotional beat or it's a big, like, look at this crazy new place that we're in, or whatever. It should be based on what's important, not on some weird, arbitrary, you know what I'm saying? Like, so, I don't know. There's lots of things like that that are, again, kind of accepted knowledge in American comics, but wrong knowledge. Or misapplied knowledge, at the very least. Yeah, and I can see, like, all sorts of mistakes here, but there just comes a point you have to finish. Next page will be better. Man, all my strong bads are here. Some of the, I see you've got that coming up, that's pretty neat. One of the injunction mix. I should probably try and pull a second screen in here if I'm gonna keep doing this. Beyond screen, really poorly. Let's see, how's that going? Maybe take that down a bit. Yeah, look at that. Maybe I could, yeah. Display capture. No. No, that's not what I wanted. Yeah, I'm sure. Well, whatever. You just get a garbage stream, I guess. It's better than it might have been. So, again, at least something. I'm just experimenting. I'm just trying to figure out what's going to work and what's not. I also need to remember how big I'm making these. Because that's going to be important. I mean, like the size that I'm making the brush. So what I do when these are on physical paper, I usually work 11 by 17. And right now, not on 11 by 17, but I'm sort of close-ish. This is 11 by 17 at like 300 DPI, something like that. 32, 33, yeah, 3300, yeah. So 11 by 17, and what I usually do is I make, you've got kind of like ½ inch, and then you've got another ½ inch, and then on the bottom I like to put 1 inch. I mean, as like the, I don't know, the actual margin, if that makes any sense. So now I got to do math. Let's see. Let's see, if 300 is 1 inch, then yeah, 150 is a half. Right? Okay. So yeah, we've got this 150 here. We've got this 150 here. Okay. It looks so big. Do the other pages look like that? I think maybe it's just because, like, in the bottom, like, 3/4 of the page, I freaking, I don't know, skipped leg day, whatever you want to say. It looks slimmer. It looks slimmer. Just to me personally. Let me look at my... Not that. Let me look at my website here. I should have more of my pages on my computer, but I've switched computers. Not exactly recently, but recently enough that I don't have a whole bunch of pages on here. Yeah, this is the ½ inch and ½ inch. Okay, it is right, technically. Gosh. It's weird looking though. Let me just sometimes I gotta really think about, like, what is my process, and other times when I've been thinking about my process for too long, it's like, okay, you know what? No, like, let's just not. Let's think about just how to get the marks down on the page, because that's ultimately what's going to make the biggest difference. nobody's gonna see sort of all the background stuff that I've done to try and get the page to come out. They're only gonna see the whatever ends up on the finished page, so we'll just kind of eyeball it. And again, like on earlier bits, on earlier parts of this comic, I was working on paper, so it was let me just is that just obnoxious? It's probably obnoxious. Anyway, is that gonna make that any better? No, it's still bad. Yeah. Again, I'm not really super set up to stream. I'm just going over like a wireless connection. I'm not even plugged into Ethernet, so if it's laggy, sorry about that. Especially if you like bothered to come here. I don't think anybody has. Nobody who's willing to speak up, at least, is here. Here, let me check. Is anyone here? One person's watching. Okay. Hello, person. Yeah, sorry you get a really garbage quality stream. At home at the opera on a fancy yacht, becoming the talk. Canterlot. Yeah, I kind of like having the I don't know, crutch of math on my side, because then I can sort of divide things up and be like, okay, like if I get the numbers all right, then it's even, so I don't have to worry so much about what, like, I don't know, what the, like, what to make every proportion, if that makes sense, in terms of just the layout of the comic. I don't know if that makes any sense. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. I don't really know what I'm talking about or saying. I'm just kind of trying to finish this. Because, like, there's a point at which it's easier to do, like, this looks right. Whoa, gee. No. No. And there's a point at which it's easier to have, like, a number that, like, or a rule that can tell you when it is right, rather than having to sort of think about it and figure it out. I don't know. I feel that way sometimes. Maybe you don't feel that way. I wish there was a better, and I know I could set it up myself, but I wish I had set up a really good keyboard shortcut for the guides and ruler tool. Whoa. Just give me a second here. Because honestly, I want to use them more than I do. But part of it is just that I don't want to bother having to go over there and hunt down the icon and click it. That's terrible, but it's true. 330. Wait a minute. This is like 70 pixels. Wait, what? Is it? No. No, that's 100. That's 100 pixels. And 150. Okay. What am I smoking? I don't know. Markiplier does not condone the smokage of any herbal substances. Okay, don't snap to the resistance. I'm really trying to, the other thing that I've been wanting to get better at experimenting with, or that I've wanted to experiment with, and so see if it's effective / get better at it, is, I found a pretty neat, and maybe you found these too before. I can't imagine they were super uncommon, because I found them in a, goodness, Half Price Books. Oops. Oop. I found them in a Half Price Books, and they were sort of how to draw manga books, but apparently these books happened before it was cool. So these days, everyone and their mother has published a how to draw manga book that's really awful. I feel like it started to like wane slightly, but like there was a point at which you could find a freaking how to draw manga book in every single bookstore, and they were all just awful, like dollar quality kind of jobbies. So I'm kind of glad that that stage is not exactly over, but like now there's some quality stuff out there that's like, hey kids, you want to draw manga? I actually sort of know the fundamentals of drawing. Like, you still see a lot of them that it's like, is that manga style? I wouldn't have thought, looking at the style, that this would be a how to draw manga book, because I don't know, just people have very different ideas of like what counts as anime or manga or whatever. So yeah, there's still kind of that weird aspect to it, but these books that I found were not any of those things. They were not designated by some, you know, white guy in a suit who was like, you know what the kids like these days, and you know, these are actually like from Japan books. They're kind of neat, and they actually have information in there about, like, for example, they have like, it's this actual series of books that's intended to help people figure out how to do comics professionally, but in like the Japanese professional scene and in like the 90s. Because, or like the early 2000s, late 90s, because that's when these were made. But like they're sort of translated slightly poorly into English. But there's a lot of really, really cool, interesting tips in there, where, and like they even got some professional authors to like come in and be like, hey kids, rather than, again, just whoever, like your cousin that you could get to do this, you know? I don't have anything against people who want to make like how to draw manga books who are like from the US or are, you know, let them be of whatever race or creed they will. I'm cool with that. But I just see a lot of stuff that's not very quality, and I especially used to see more stuff that was less quality. But these are not like that, and it's really interesting to see sort of the tips that they felt like young artists who were going to have this as their profession and sort of come up through their system, because they actually have a system there, which to me is another reason why they're kind of doing better than American comics. Not like comic IPs, but comics, the medium, in the United States. And North America in general, to some degree, but Canadian comics are better than American comics. You know I'm right, and that's a little depressing. Ha 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 ha, sorry if you're from Canada, one viewer. Anyway, these guys, in one of these books, they had a tip that was basically like, what, you know, they're talking about what editors are going to be looking for, and what's going to help you get your submission to a publisher approved. So they have this thing where it's like, look, on every page, or at least on every spread, there should be something that's like a wow. There should be some kind of panel that is a wow panel, you know? Of course, the joke that they went right for is like nudity. That'll make people go wow. But then, you know, they sort of spin off of that and are like, I mean, not really. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about things that are like a really interesting sort of money shot, or something that's visually gonna stick off the page, or even something that is in an interesting looking panel, even if the panel itself is like not of something extremely exciting. It should at least sort of be exciting looking, right? So I've been kind of trying to think about, well, that's probably a pretty good idea to have there be, basically the idea is they want, if a reader picks up your comic, they should be able to look at it and go, like, they should be able to open it up to any page and go, ooh, this looks interesting, right? Because that's what's going to sell your magazine, you know? So, sheesh, why can't I do this? Is that what we're looking for? Oops. I can't even remember what I was saying. Something inane, I'm sure. Oh, I've been trying to think about, or at least keep that in mind when I'm planning out pages, is like, what's going to be the wow panel? Like, what's the big deal here? What's going to be the really interesting visual sort of money shot? So that's something I've been kind of trying to focus on. And this page, one of the reasons that it's like, it's so frustrating to me because I'm trying to focus on this, and then I thought that this panel right here, you probably can't see it, but this fifth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yes, 5, I can count. I thought that the fifth panel was kind of going to be the wow panel, because in it, and again, I put a spoiler warning up, but like this arm, this separate arm, we've already seen basically that it's alive, but we're just sort of reconfirming that it's alive, because it grabs onto Hubert here, which kind of freaks him out. It kind of freaks everyone out, and I thought that's going to be the wow, right? But it turns out that also on this page I have this other thing that I think would make a better wow panel, or series of panels, where you have this guy sort of blow his whistle, and then the other thing about this whistle blow is that it's going to be the transition to the next scene, which turns out to be right on the page break. I probably could have made it not on the page break, but it was already just, oops, it was already just so crowded that, like, there was no, I don't know, I just felt like it needed to be whatever, I needed to be getting done with this page, and also I felt like it was maybe too, like, again, too crowded. There were too many ideas trying to assert themselves all on one page, so I wanted to basically get across, like, yes, her arm is alive, and it's, like, interacting with the things around it, and it's still really strong, because that's one of her things, is that she's pretty strong. And I also wanted to, I wanted to sort of say, oh, look, these guys are, and again, I only thought of it afterward, but it's like, oh shoot, these guys are adversely affected by this whistle, because we saw them come when called earlier, and now it's like, oh, we're gonna see them all react to this whistle. And then that's gonna be our transition over to the other page. If you've been reading the comic, and this isn't really a spoiler, but you know that sort of there's another scene going on right now in which Hubert, this guy, his brother has come looking for him. So they're in another room of this weird lab, surrounded by weird dog-like creatures. And I want you to sort of have the transition be that we sort of cut back to this other scene with the dog creatures by saying, oh, look, they heard this sound that Hubert can't hear. Whoopsie. Because he's just got regular human hearing, but these other creatures can hear because they're weird. Look how weird they are. Weird. So, let's see, 5100, 57? No, 47, 48. That would be the inch mark. Golly. Alrighty. That just cuts off so much. Golly. And see, like, I'm worrying about this, but it's not like I'm really 100% building it for print. I've thought of having it printed, but, you know, like, it's not like the size that I'm working at is actually a printing size either. 11 by 17s, like, I don't know. Nobody's really going to print very much at that size. Like, it's just like a weird size, so it's not like a standard comic book size. It's not a really standard like book size of any kind. It's just kind of the one thing that I've thought that is kind of nice about it. Well, one is that I can get 11 by 17 like printer paper pretty easily and cheaply, and then the other thing is that I can get I could potentially just go to like Kinko's or somewhere, print some of these on like 2 pages to 8.5 by 11 and then fold them in half. But I feel like the 8.5 by 11 to 11/17 isn't super key to that, and I would rather have it be something that looks nice rather than something that I clearly made myself. It's surprising how big a difference that type of thing can make. Even in just convincing yourself that you're like a quote-unquote real artist. You know? Like, obviously you're a real artist, but it's sometimes difficult to convince yourself of that if you're, at least if you're like me. So, I don't know, I guess I'm just going with whatever I'm going with at this point. It's just almost yeah, this is too laggy, really, to be a good stream. Oh. No, it's going okay. Oddly enough. Well, don't want to save that. And again, I know I don't have the best setup here. I should really have another screen set up that I can sort of check the stream stuff with rather than having it all on one screen, but this is just the setup I have right now, so I didn't even think I was going to really be doing this today. I'm basically figuring on the rest of this stuff being thinner than 7 pixels. Man, I wish I didn't do stupid things like... Okay, so I had Hubert take off a glove to wipe his face off, so now... and I had him come out of the cave, the little tunnel that he and Sister found. I had him come out without his glove. Like, that's in the shot where he leaves their hidey hole. And I'm kind of kicking myself because it's like, no, there's just one more thing to remember with the character. Like, which hand is it that has the glove off, and it's another extra bit of coloring to take care of because he's sooty for, like, all over him except for where he had, you know, like, gloves and stuff on. So good extra work. I don't know why I do things like this to myself, but I do, apparently. Pro tip, don't do things that make your drawings needlessly complicated. Like having the character suddenly be asymmetrical because they've removed one glove or one shoe or one arm. Like, you know, you'd think having to try and remember which arm was missing would be enough. Which arm was missing from Sister's body, but apparently not for me. Just a glutton for punishment, I guess. And I still haven't really figured out what I'm gonna... I don't know. Just like, there's all sorts of little things that aren't really working for me yet, because I'm still kind of figuring out this whole digital deal. I've always basically, well, as long as I've been doing Precious Metal, I've always had to sort of make the pages digital eventually, but like in order to put them online, obviously, like they have to be digital. But for basically as long as I've been doing Precious Metal, all of the drawing was done outside the computer, and then all of the coloring, as soon as there was coloring, all of the coloring was done inside the computer. Even on the older issues, I was doing black and white and grayscale, and even those had a little bit of that's where I would sort of clean up my artwork, because I think that's easier than whiteout. Is sort of the tools that you have in the computer. But there's also like the issue of I don't know where I was going with that. At any rate, I started doing some of the pages in this issue, like from beginning to end, all digitally, and it's been a real weird transition for me, because you sort of have to get used to like zooming in and out and trying to figure out like what's working and what isn't when you don't have maybe the full the view that you might want of everything. And you also don't have, at least in my mind, especially before I got a slightly bigger tablet recently, but on a small tablet, like, it's so hard. It's so hard to draw. It's like, it sucks. Not trying to dissuade anybody from buying a tablet for sure, but just be prepared for it to not be maybe as magical as previously. as you might think. It's got a lot of difficulty to it. I struggle with it still, and I have slightly better tools now than I did before. Basically, you just have to accept that you're gonna see all sorts of little imperfections, and they're just gonna be there forever. Cool. Whereas with, I don't know, at least for me, when it's not digital, like, I look at it and I see the imperfections and I'm like, yeah, but there's not really anything I could have done about it. You know? Or, like, I can fix, like, the worst parts of this. Whereas with digital, it's just, like, everything is the worst part. Everything has all sorts of problems. The other thing, too, was, I definitely had a system for inking when I was outside the computer, so I had a lot of kind of practice and a lot of logic and rules, like I said, where I didn't have to think about, well, what kind of pen am I going to use next, or what kind of thing am I going to use for this part, like how big is it going to be, how do I sort of get that line contrast that I want. Whereas, like, right now, literally as I'm doing this, I'm figuring out, like, well, how thick is this or that line gonna be, and is that going to look right? I kind of want to get these, this question mark and exclamation point out of the way of the chopping motion. I still want them to be here because, I don't know, I feel like placement in comics is really, really, really key to understanding, like, what's going on, and I feel like if somebody is startled and this is their reaction that they're having, it should be near their head to show that it's not just their reaction, but, like, they're thinking it. It's, like, coming from their head. I don't know. I think that makes, like, intuitive sense. But you don't want that to get in the way of, like, these motion lines where they're going to tell you what is happening and why. I feel like I use that same tool on that aha, and I'm not sure if I want to. Nah, that's no good. Nope. Nope. I kind of like that, but it's not good enough for me to want. Like, I want it to kind of look scratchy, like these marks that I've made in the pencil. So I think I'm gonna go with this and just kind of try and layer them a little bit, and also not try and necessarily go with as soft an edge as maybe this has if you sort of give it full pressure. This could work. Oops. That O doesn't really match. Like, I kind of want this, like, this type of a shape out of the letters, like C-H-O-P, because it's like they're arcing out from where the noise is coming from. But I think that my logic here was that I kind of liked this little, like, this little hand pose. slash that I just wasn't planning it out right. Which is entirely possible. It's just Elmer's Town. Why is the O so wide? Like, it's so much wider than the other letters. Let's just see if we can't make that a little bit skinnier. You know what's interesting? I've been looking at, there was this famous artist cartoon course from like the 50s that I had heard from at least one source that at least they thought it was public domain, so I don't know, whatever, good enough for me. But the artists, basically it was all these famous sort of comic strip artists from, you know, the time period, which was like the 50s, where they were sort of giving, there were these correspondence courses that you could take. So, you know, you send in by mail your assignments, and then you get more in the mail back that are like, okay, here's how we graded your assignment and whatever. It's like online classes, but a million years ago. And it's really interesting because they have all these people like Rube Goldberg, which like, you've heard of Rube Goldberg machines, but nobody really, like, it's not like they don't talk about the fact that he was a cartoonist, but I think a lot of people just think of the machines themselves and they don't go, wow, that was an entire comic strip? That's pretty incredible. Anyway, but Rube Goldberg is one of their famous artists, and another one is this guy called Al Capp, who made Lil Abner, which was a sort of satirical and kind of wildly successful comic strip from the time that's like set in sort of rural Southern America, and is just a complete like parody and satire of not just like various things in the South or whatever, or various things in like a small town / among a bunch of uneducated people, but it also had like a lot of satire just of like society at the time. Nowadays, at least my personal feeling about it is that it's almost impossible to read, because he does that thing where you spell out all the dialect stuff. So like, if you want them to be talking like they're Southern, it's like, well, I sure am hungry or whatever, but like, you spell sure instead of S-U-R-E, you spell it like S-H-O-R-E. And that just gets real obnoxious to read really, really, really fast. So I personally think it's almost unreadable, just because the dialogue is so spelled out, and that's painful for me. I don't know if it is for anyone else, but it was really interesting to see, they were talking about, and it honestly, the thing it reminded me most of was that sort of Japanese comic instruction, you know, book that I was telling you about earlier. But because there's a section where they talk about what kind of pens do different artists who are successful cartoonists use, and sort of how do they use them. And there's pictures of Lil Abner, who is, you know, again, this famous comic strip character from the time. And they talk about how, well, like, this part is done, like, the face is done with, like, a regular nib, and then the hair is filled in, because he has black hair, it's filled in with brush. It's just real interesting. And the other thing about it was that, and I don't know, maybe this would be insulting to the guy who draws JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, because JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is extremely distinctive in its art style, but I don't think that Lil Abner is Joseph Joestar or anything, but I think that it'd be neat to see JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in the style of Lil Abner. Let me show you. Hang on. Is this the head in detail? Inking the head and figure? Maybe this is it. All sorts of ink stuff. Yeah, there's some things. Yeah, there's Lil Abner. Doesn't he just kind of have that weird, like, honest look about his face? And he's got, like, similar hair to JoJo. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I'd love to see somebody take, like, Little Abner and do JoJo, like, retell JoJo's story in that style, or at least make a couple little pictures of it. I think that'd be real neat. They just remind me of each other. I don't know. Anyway, it's interesting to see sort of like what's different and what isn't, and you know, there's just all sorts of things that like you can learn from other people and how they like handled their tools, you know. I found out today that the Lil Abner guy, in addition to doing a bunch of like marketing tie-ins, so like Lil Abner loves like shredded wheat because he, you know, did a marketing tie-in with them. There's all sorts of things like that, but then he also did like a satirical comic about how like syndication works and how basically syndicates just take everything from creators who create like the strips that make them successful. It's not so bad nowadays, in part because people got so upset about it, but he made a parody of the whole Superman situation, in which, you know, Siegel and Schuster, this artist and writer who had created Superman and made him like an icon that was famous and beloved by people, like they really got kind of screwed over by the company, by DC. And that wasn't uncommon exactly, but just because Superman's like such a high profile figure, it's like, wow, really? I don't know. I'm not saying Marvel's not evil, but DC is evil. They are. But he made this whole satirical comic about how, you know, Little Abner comes up with a cartoon and it gets pretty successful, and there's this guy named, I can't remember his name, it's like Julius P. Squeezeblood or something, and he just is like, well, I'm just gonna take all these profits here and be on my way. Like, yeah, it was, you know, extremely satirical. But I really kind of like just like the raw art style. There's a lot of things that I don't love exactly about it, and it certainly has like an older aesthetic to it, but just looking at like the way it's inked, it's really pretty. There's a lot of really beautiful ink work in those types of things. Okay, somebody's calling me, so